Hello, everybody. I'm Peter Myers.
I'm Reese Gabois.
And this is Of Mountains and Men. So today we're actually joined by a good friend of ours, Chase, who is recently, a couple years ago, converted to Catholicism. And we got him in our Bible study a year and a half ago or so, something like that. But today we'll have a chance to catch up with Reese and kind of talk through some of his journey.
Catch up with Chase.
Oh, yeah. This is why it's a long form podcast and not like a radio show, because we're just gonna let that sit and like people can laugh at me, and that's good. So
we're gonna hear about
it'll
Chase,
give people
not
a chance
Reese.
to chuckle, because we already had an episode all about Reese a couple weeks back, or a couple episodes back. Enough. So we will be hearing about Chase, who I was looking at when I said Reese for some reason, but so. We'll be doing that tonight. But to start out, Chase, if you want to just give us a little bit of like a introduction to, where you're from, name, kind of things like that generally.
Yeah, so my name's Chase Werfel. I grew up in the great state of Illinois. As Peter mentioned, I converted to Catholicism about 2 years ago now, Easter 2022. I went to college at Purdue University in Indiana, go Boilers. And I'll definitely share a little more about it, but that was kind of where I first encountered the Catholic faith. And I graduated in 2021, got a degree in finance, and moved out to Maryland for a job that I got working for a large defense contractor at the time. Doing like finance work. Kind of just moved out here, got a bit of like a fresh start. Didn't really know anyone when I moved out here, but I knew I wanted to be Catholic, enrolled in RCIA, got involved in more Catholic young adult community, which is where I ended up eventually meeting Peter and even Reese through like Bible study and lots of other faithful Catholics in the Maryland area as well.
Yeah, I still remember the first time that I met Chase. We were at a young adult, I think it was a Theology on Tap or something like that, or whatever they called it at the time. But we ended up like having a really funny conversation with some people afterward. But and then like pretty quickly, Reese ended up. He jokes about this that like he ended up being kind of my chauffeur for some of the Catholic young adult things in the area, because I was living in the Hartford County area and couldn't really get around without someone driving me, and so Reese lived pretty close by. So
he lived pretty close by, and that was just kind of how we struck up a friendship. Like, I don't know if we'd be as good of friends today if we hadn't had all those car conversations.
Oh yeah, I mean, I doubt it. We had a lot of like good like in-depth conversations in those car rides. So
nice.
Yeah,
it was a blessing.
Yeah,
for sure.
Peter's blindness is a blessing. That's what I'm hearing right
now. I guess in one sense, yeah.
God can bring good, from all things. Oh, that's true. Sweet.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I think I know we want to kind of get into some of the more details. Like obviously that was a general overview, which is good and helpful, but to get a little bit more of like an idea of the story of like kind of how you converted, how you decided to become Catholic, and where that kind of all started.
Yeah, so I can give sort of a longer testimony since we're on a podcast now. I've really only shared shorter forms of my testimony with people because people have short attention spans nowadays, and I always feel weird about taking up people's time with all my talking and stuff. But so like I said, I grew up in Illinois a normal 2-parent household, a mother and a father. I have one sister who's a couple years older than me, and we grew up in like the suburbs of Chicago. It was a pretty nice area, safe area to grow up in. Great community around there. Really, my childhood was honestly like very good. There's always things you would maybe change about it. Not everything is perfect, but I think compared to like most kids growing up today, I really had it made. Honestly, I had like a great childhood. I had some loving parents. I had people who cared about me, again, was in a safe area. I got involved in a lot of things. I was actually a pretty talented kid, I would say.
Soccer, right?
Yeah, well, so I did.
Well, you also cup stacking. So
Whoa.
Yeah, so
Diverse
I was
skills.
on the national team for, it's called sport stacking officially. Held a world record or two for a short time.
isn't that wild?
What?
Yeah.
Wait, you
so-
talking about those people when they would like do the pyramid stacking with the cups?
Mhm.
Yeah, Chase can still do it to this day. I think, right?
Oh yeah, totally. It's just it's muscle memory. See, I'm not really practicing much anymore. But so I got really into that, and actually started like competing in like tournaments. I would like travel across the country for tournaments and just like smoke those other 10-year-olds. Like it was a fun time. It was a fun time.
Isn't that
man.
awesome?
Can you
Yeah.
play the cup song from Pitch Perfect?
No.
Sorry.
Did you intentionally like never learn that?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, I could see that. A rebellious Chase, like I'm not.
Cup
Okay,
stacking's
wait.
way cooler than whatever the heck
yeah,
that was.
yeah.
So.
So wait, how did you?
Like, how did that happen?
How did you
question?
organically become a cup stacker? Like one day there were these cups. You saw
Yeah,
someone else
so-
doing them, and they're like, "Well, you're really good at this." Like,
No, so actually what happened was it was Christmas of 2006, I believe, and I got a set of these speed stacks from, I think it was my aunt who gifted them to me, and I immediately like took them down to the basement and was like, I'm gonna like stack these, and then it's funny, immediately on the way downstairs I like dropped one of the cups and then like broke it, and I was
Oh.
like, no. But
you overcame the adversity.
I did. As soon as I bought a replacement cup on the internet, I started stacking like crazy. And yeah, it was just. I've joked with people that I'm mildly autistic. I don't think I actually am, but I have little fixations on things sometimes. And this was one of those things
Yeah.
where like I just like started doing it, and then I was suddenly like, I can't stop. I have to be really good. And so I got good because I just practiced for hours a day. It was like, this is what I was doing as a kid.
Do you like watch Michael Jordan's The Last Dance and just be like, "Oh yeah, that resonates with me," but just like with cup stacking? They're like, "I'm obsessed. That's what makes me great."
I don't know how to answer that. I was competitive.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
I
I
mean,
was,
you held
you were
world
traveling.
records for a time.
yeah,
right? So
I was fairly competitive with it. And
Are there
yeah,
videos of you on the
there
internet?
are, right? I think I've
Yeah.
seen them.
Yeah.
Keep talking.
I have a
keep
YouTube
talking.
channel that still has some videos up. They're all from when I was
Yeah,
like
they're like little
12
Chase
years
cup
old or
stacking.
whatever. But
I'll put a link to those in the description.
yeah, it's
That's actually a great idea. Yeah.
Oh
It's
my
a talent of
gosh.
mine.
What's your
I-
last name?
Werfel, Werfel. So
Cup stacking.
yeah,
Keep talking.
you can
Others.
link that in the description.
Yeah, we will,
or
so-
whatever. But so yeah, on
you
top
cup stacking
on top
as a
of
kid,
that,
yeah.
I played soccer.
Mm-hmm.
I was taking piano lessons. I was taking guitar lessons.
Which I can attest that you're also pretty good at piano, honestly.
Holy.
yeah, I've been playing
Sorry.
for a while.
Holy flipping goodness.
Are you
Chase.
watching him right now?
Yeah. Is there like team stacking too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
So what
Chase and
what I held the world record in was something called doubles, which is basically where instead of one person stacking, you have two people stacking together, like the same stack. And so I actually did that with my cousin Matt. He stacked with me, and
Oh my
we were,
gosh.
we were both very good individually, but we were also very good like doing
As a
doubles.
team? Wow.
Yeah, and so we actually set a world record, but then it was beaten like right away by some other people, but we can still say we had it for
Yeah.
a short time.
for those of you who listen, follow those links. Okay. I just watched like 2 of those videos. It's insane.
It is really wild.
Oh
I've
my
seen it, yeah.
goodness. Oh wow. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so cup
Anyway,
stacking,
yeah.
soccer, piano.
Slight tangent. I did a lot of things growing up. What we did not do was go to church. My parents were not particularly religious. I suppose you could say they were loosely Christian. I was baptized in the Episcopalian church as a baby, And yeah, I think because my mom had been pretty involved in the Episcopal Church, like as a teenager and somewhat through college as well. So there was that like seed of faith there for her, and I'm sure that was part of the reason she wanted to have me baptized. But after that, there wasn't much like religious education given to me, if any, by my parents or by anyone in my life, really. And yeah, so I didn't really know what I was missing out on there. And like I said, I do still think I had like a great childhood, but that was one of those things where it's like, you know, I would have really loved to have known who Jesus was a lot sooner in my life. And so, yeah, seeing young kids be raised in the faith now is like very touching to me, because it's like, oh, like I do wish I like could have had that. But
did you have friends growing up who were like Christian of any sort, or?
I had a few. Most people were not really practicing
Okay.
much of anything. Yeah, I didn't know anybody that was practicing Catholicism. I had a few friends that were like non-denominational, who were somewhat involved in the church community. But besides that, I mean, I'm sure there were many Catholics at my school and stuff like that, but I just, you know, they probably didn't practice their faith, honestly, and so it was
Probably.
you know,
That's
it was
possible,
probably
yeah.
not very apparent that they were Catholics. I never noticed, but let me think. Yeah, so I pretty much did not have much exposure to religion in general growing up. We would go to church occasionally on like Christmas and Easter. Those were like the only times we would have gone. And most of the time it was just like a toss up, really, like if we went or not. Like Christmas would come and we could sort of look at the clock and be like, oh, well, we know they have a service at 8:00, but do we really want to go? All right, let's not go, or whatever. And then if we did go, I would have no idea what's going on, and I would be so bored, and I didn't like that my mom would make me wear like a suit there or something. I'm like, this is all tight, and like I don't want to be like, I just hated it, really. So I didn't even want to go, really. But yeah, so I didn't really want to go, but I started to get more exposure, I think, to the Christian faith a little bit through high school, not through anything I was learning in school or anything like that. I went to like a public high school. It was, you know, I didn't hear really anything about religion except for bad things there. But yeah, I did have a friend who was involved. He was involved in like a non-denominational like mega church in the area, and that was probably my first exposure to some sort of Christianity, aside from just being dragged to church growing up and having nothing explained to me. I remember he invited me on a retreat. Yeah, I think it was over winter break. Yeah, I think I was a sophomore in high school, I think, where he invited me on this retreat. And yeah, just like speaking into that a little more. And I was not really that impacted positively by it. Because, well, yeah, let me back up a little. I wanted to go on that retreat because I was genuinely like curious about like God and religion for whatever reason. Like, I suppose God like prompted that in me, like, because no one else in my life is really talking about it. So I don't really know what like sparked that curiosity other than like the Lord himself. But I was like, yeah, I'm just curious about this. I remember my mom even asking me kind of like why I was going when like we're not particularly religious, and was like, is that something you like want? Like, you know, what are your desires, Chase? Like, why are you kind of going here? And I just kind of said, yeah, like I don't know what I believe, but I'm open, I'm curious. So I went on this retreat, and the best thing that I can say about it was that it taught me that Christians could be fun, because it was a lot of fun. We did a lot of fun things. The people there were like really cool to hang out with. The activities were really fun. There were even like small groups where we got to like be like a little little more vulnerable, share more personal things, which
Mm-hmm.
was something I hadn't really experienced much of in like male friendships like growing up. So I was like, this is like nice. But I think where it fell short was it didn't really teach me that much about God. It didn't really teach me much about Jesus and why I should like believe in him, why I should have a relationship with him. It was kind of just a place where we all had fun and we shared some personal stuff. But at the end of the day, for whatever reason, I did not feel particularly convicted that like Jesus was like real, or I had to believe in any of this to like live a good life. I also had, I think, a false perception that in order to become a religious person, in order for me to actually like convert and change my life, God would need to make it abundantly clear to me through some sort of overwhelming experience. And so something that happened or something that I saw happen to other people at this retreat, which will happen at lots of retreats you go to, Protestant or Catholic or whatever, is you'll probably see people having like big conversion experiences or really feeling God like working in them. And so I'd see people, hands up, praising, and just really, they're feeling the Spirit, they're feeling God. And I frankly, I just didn't have that. I was not a particularly feely person. My faith is really still not to this day. It has never really been about like my feelings. But I had the perception that in order to convert, like I would need to have this experience, because in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if this person's having this emotional religious experience, if God is granting them that, if God is real and is giving them that, well, then why isn't he giving that to me? If God were all good, he would be giving that to everybody, so everybody could know that he's real and they could know for sure like what they're supposed to believe and how they're supposed to live. But because he's not giving that to me, there's either no proof that he's real, or like all of those things that people are experiencing are just fake.
Or Calvinism is true, and you are not one of the chosen.
That's true too. Yeah,
You are not one
I
of the
am
predestined.
doubly predestined to hell or whatever.
I think that is a pretty relatable experience, though, for a lot of people. Of like, even those sometimes who grew up Catholic who might feel like they're not really part of the group if they don't have like that experience or something, or that feeling or that thing or whatever. And I think that is a danger that we have to avoid sometimes, or whatever. Not in the sense of you avoiding it, in the sense of us as church communities, whatever community might be, like helping people understand that it's okay to not have that experience. That like that shouldn't be a reason that, because I'm sure no one said that to you, right? Like no one was like,
Right.
It's okay not to have this experience. Like you just saw all the people having the experience, and you're like, naturally, you're like, well, why aren't I having that experience? Like,
yeah, nobody really told me that it's okay to not have that experience. I didn't really find that out until much later.
Yeah. To backtrack a little bit, so you said you didn't have any. You were just curious. Was there ever a point like before that? I mean, I'm not sure where I have an idea where the rest of the story goes, but there's a few dark spots still for me. But was there ever a point of like, what is the point to anything? What is meaning? Like, why do I do anything? Or were you like still young enough? Because I know some people from a very young age, like I was just listening to a discussion between Elon Musk and Dr. Jordan Peterson. And at 12 years old, Elon Musk went through a crisis of meaning where he decided to read all the religious text, because he's like, this can't, what we have, it just can't be everything,
Yeah.
That's a
It's a
great
good
question. I'm not sure I actually like went that deep with it, frankly. I think what may have prompted me to explore religion was just that I saw other people who placed more of an emphasis of faith in their life were just happier than I was, I think. And I do remember that sophomore year of high school was a particularly rough one for me. And that, it was a number of reasons, stuff going on in the home with like my parents being divorced around that time.
Okay.
Also my sister was going through a lot of like mental health stuff at the time that was like hard on me and our family. At the same time, I had a lot of friends in high school that I made through like playing soccer, but for a couple of different reasons I decided to like not play soccer my sophomore year, and so I got a little little disconnected with those friends that I had made. So there were a couple things I can point to where it's like, okay, I can see how God then worked and was like, hey, let me show you a bit of myself now that you're feeling maybe a little isolated, a little down, maybe a little sad. Let me start like revealing myself to you, even in like the smallest ways.
That's beautiful.
But yeah, at the time I was like, oh, God's not revealing himself to me, because again, I didn't have a massive experience on this retreat, but like I realize now, like God still was revealing himself to me, but it was rather than like a massive like bomb going off, it was more like he was just kind of like poking me with like a little needle or something.
So you left that retreat disappointed?
I mean, I wouldn't say totally disappointed. Like I had a fun time, and like I can't remember if I went back again or not, but like I had a fun time, but I suppose in terms of like getting answers to faith, I was like disappointed. And I remember like talking to at least one of the like people who was helping lead the retreat after that, and just saying how, yeah, this was great, but like I don't know if this is really for me, like I don't know if this Christianity thing's really for me.
Yeah.
But you did say that retreat like kind of opened your eyes to Christians could have fun though, at least.
Oh
right?
yeah,
like that was something
absolutely.
that you got from that was being able to kind of understand that perspective, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we don't just whip ourselves daily. Well, in front of people.
Yeah, and
Well,
that is important.
Yeah, and it is interesting because I think to Reese's question and your response to that of like what kind of brought you to that in some ways, to that realization of like, like Reese asking about like if you had an existential questions in your heart, but also like the beauty of like it may not have been existential, but it was more like I'm unhappy, and like why am I unhappy? And thinking that there must be something more out there in a sense, right? Like you didn't necessarily have. It sounds like you didn't have those thoughts per se, but you kind of that was the underlying thing there in a sense.
Yeah,
right? It was like this like sense of like uncomfortability with like where you were at. And so you're like, maybe there's something in this religion thing, right? Like that's what it. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just wondering because that's what it sounds like you're sort of saying.
I would say that's like pretty accurate, and I think if I took the feelings I was having to their logical conclusion, it would end up in that more existential, like, what is the meaning of life kind of thing. I mean, I do remember a few times growing up, like thinking about like death, and actually I would be like thinking about death and just being like, wow, it's like really scary. Like what if you die, there's just nothing. And like, I was trying to picture myself like not existing anymore, and I couldn't, because it's literally not possible to like picture yourself being dead. Yeah. And that actually kind of like terrified me. But every time I thought about it, I'd just be like, okay, I don't need to think about that. Put that away, right? Which is unfortunately probably how most people still think today. But
I think I remember Matt Fradd saying that everyone knows they're going to die, but no one really thinks they're going to die.
Yeah.
And I was
nobody thinks about it. Yeah.
When we live in a very sterilized culture as far as death too, like we try to push death off into the like fringes so that we don't have to think about it, don't have to encounter the reality.
And that makes sense that when you're a child, but for some reason people continue. They've extended their childhood into their mid-30s, I would guess. Some even their late 40s. But
But anyway,
so after this retreat experience, what was the next step for you in this journey?
Well, I guess I underwent kind of a faith hiatus for a pretty long time after
That's
that.
enough
actually.
for me.
Yeah, I was kind of like, well, I tried that. I just continued through the rest of high school. Like I said, I'm pretty sure this retreat happened when I was a sophomore.
Okay.
So I finished my junior and senior year. Had like a great group of friends. Mostly stayed out of trouble for the most part. They were like good influences and everything, even if they weren't like Catholic. Kept me out of trouble, which was good. I like dated a girl through high school. In my junior year, went to all the dances. I played soccer again. I played volleyball. I just did a lot of fun things that kind of like kept me busy, and my mind wasn't really on faith. Really, I was kind of just like, I'm just trying to have a good time and make some good friends, make some good memories, and that's sort of what I did.
So what was next is, so where do things start to pick up for you a little bit spiritually? Was it in college?
Yeah, so college is when things really kind of started to shift. I decided to go to Purdue University because it was pretty close to home, but not so close that I would have to be expected to be home so regularly and stuff like that.
I can relate with that.
Yeah, like I wanted some distance, but not a crazy amount. It was about 3 hours probably away.
Yeah, you could go home during the weekends if you wanted to.
Yeah, I could have, and I would come home for breaks and everything. But they had a good like business school. I knew it was a pretty academically oriented school. So I decided to go. And my freshman year, I'm living in this dorm it's a all male dorm, no AC or anything. It was pretty, it was pretty hot. It's a bonding experience when it's just super hot.
Was it a
dorm
good
together.
dorm? Like, did you have fun?
Oh yeah. So this is when like I kind of got introduced to faith. So I became very close friends with a lot of the people. Well, a lot is a strong word. Really, probably like 4 or 5 guys on my floor, and not all of them were Catholic, but some of them were, and the ones who weren't Catholic were some other brand of Christian, generally, Protestant, non-denominational, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I became very good friends with like lots of Catholics, and it wasn't because they were Catholic per se. Like I wasn't seeking out Catholics. Obviously, I had no idea what Catholics even like were. I just became friends with them because they were fun people, and I was looking for fun people and like some good friends. But over time, I started to see that they were actually like striving to practice their faith in college, which I had never really like seen before. Like they like went to mass. They were involved in our university's like Catholic center. They like went on the retreats that they hosted, and we're just involved in their Catholic community on campus in many ways. So they started inviting me to some of those things. Usually I would be stubborn and say no, unless there was free food involved. I think they had like, there was one night where they would offer like free pizza. And I eventually started saying yes to that because I was like,
dude, a free pizza in college is like a ribeye steak. Like,
Yeah,
once you're an adult,
exactly.
you're like,
yeah.
When I was a focus missionary, we used to always talk about that of like food is a great way to get people to come to things.
It's the backbone of campus ministry, really. Like,
free food,
free pizza. So
the backbone.
I started going to some of those. Again, just for the free food and to be with my friends. And if there was mass tied to it, I would always ask like, but do I have to go to mass? They'd be like, well, no, you don't have to. I'd be like, okay, great. I'll just come for the pizza and then I'll leave, basically. So that was kind of like where it started, where it kind of started to take a more serious turn, I suppose, was my sophomore year. So my sophomore year, I actually, like I said, I had these great Catholic friends. Even though I wasn't Catholic myself, like they didn't mind that. They just met me where I was at and loved me, and they were great friends, honestly. My sophomore year, I sort of had like a crisis of sorts, thinking that for some reason I was like really missing out on like the college experience, and that maybe I needed like a different group of friends, or I needed to be cooler or something. So naturally, I was like, well, I'm going to rush a fraternity, which anybody who knows me now, when I tell them that,
I think I forgot that. That shocks me.
Yeah, people are shocked when I say I was in a fraternity for
I am shocked.
time.
I am shocked.
Yeah, and granted, like I was not, I don't know, I didn't want any like hazing or any horrible stuff like that. So the one that I joined actually had like the highest GPA on campus. I like knew some people in it.
What was it called?
Sigma Tau Gamma.
I had a buddy from high school who joined a fraternity. Like they had the exact. I wonder if it's the same one, just a different chapter, obviously at a different university.
Maybe
because it was like, we have the highest GPA. Like we really care about academics and not going overboard with the party stuff.
Yeah.
While still having a good time.
Yeah, right. So that was part of the reason I joined. I'm like, okay, if there's a fraternity to join, this might as well be the one I joined. So, I like rushed it and was about to be. Well, actually, let me back up a little bit. So, like, as I was rushing this fraternity, one of my good Catholic friends, he was a very close friend of mine, like, invited me on something called Boiler Awakening. You may have heard of like Awakening retreats. It's like a college Catholic retreat. I think they do it at a number of different universities, but this one was specific to like Purdue. And my friend helped like put on this retreat like every semester. So in the spring of my the spring of my sophomore year, second semester, he invited me on this retreat. And I think he had invited me on it before that too, and I just said no. I honestly can't really remember, but for whatever reason, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'll go. I'll check it out. So I committed to that like 2 months in advance, and then when it came time to be initiated into the fraternity, the the date of the initiation and the start of the retreat were the same, and so they were in conflict. And I was like, oh. And I kind of had this thought of like, I almost felt like God was like asking me to choose in that moment. Like, do you want to like, just live like a secular life in a fraternity and be absorbed in like more like party culture, I suppose? Or do you want to like take a chance and try and like encounter the Lord and grow deeper in faith? And
so was that actually going through your mind, or is that something in retrospect?
I think that was in my mind at the time. Yeah.
Wow.
Where I was like, dang, like, what should I really choose here? And at the time, I was like, yeah, like, I want to, I cared about joining the fraternity, sure, but I also was kind of wanting to, like, explore faith again because I had seen the friends that I had, again, just the joy.
Mm-hmm.
The love that they had for people. It was so great, and something I don't think I really had in myself. And I also just didn't want to break a commitment to my friend that I had made. And I knew he would be very disappointed if I had like said no at the last minute because of this like stupid fraternity or whatever. So I was like, no, I'm going to go on this retreat. And it ended up working out because they just initiated me later anyway. But like they made it seem like that like couldn't happen or whatever. But so anyway, I went on this retreat, and this was another kind of like pivotal moment for me. So I mentioned the non-denominational retreat I went on in high school. Well, this one was specifically Catholic, and this time I was much more like, okay, like I think I believe at this point I'm like I think I believe God is real. I'm like I don't know for certain, but I think so, and I really want to try and like be open to whatever God like wants for me.
So why were you sorry to interrupt, but just you're making some good points, and I just have a lot of questions about them. So what got you to that point where you're like, okay, maybe I think God is real? Like, why did you have that thought? What caused that? Was it the good friends you had and the joy that they had?
Yeah, I think it was mainly like the behavior of Christians around me, and I don't know if I necessarily went so deep as to be like, oh, well, if God's not real, then life is meaningless, for example.
Right.
But I think it really was just like the behavior of Christians around me. And I kind of came to believe personally that like I suppose like the morals that I had, or many of the morals that I had aligned up with like my Catholic friends, for example. Like I was like pro-life. Okay, my
really?
Catholic friends were like very pro-life. Yeah, I mean, that was one example. I mean, there are other things I like did not agree with them on, but for the most part, I was like, okay, these are people who like have their head on straight and like, kind of like share my values. And so that definitely made me more open to it as well. Because even if I didn't believe everything that they believed, I knew I believed like some of it. And that was, I suppose, enough for me.
Had you
at the
gone
time.
to any like talks at the Catholic Center or anything like that? Because I know you said you went to some things where they had pizza, but like were there any like I don't know, talks or things like that involved with that that you had been to, or community events or anything?
No, not at that point. I
Okay.
hadn't gone to anything. I think I had maybe gone to mass once,
Okay.
but that was about it.
He probably skipped most of the talks for the pizza.
I mean, yeah, I was just curious if that contributed at all to like you saying that, because usually that Reese is right, that you did kind of just like, now you believe in God, so that is really interesting to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. I think my shift to believing in God was not so much that I saw proof for God, but that I saw that people who believed in God acted a certain way that I admired. and that was good.
That's
So
awesome.
That's beautiful.
so yeah, I guess that was kind of what opened me up to it. But again, I went on this retreat, and I'm trying to think about what I want to talk about and what happened on this retreat. It's a little fuzzy because it was like 5 years ago at this point.
I've noticed like with retreats that have a big impact on me, they like explain everything to me that happened,
Yeah.
and I'm like, dude,
Oh, yeah, I know.
it was a blur.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not like it was forgetful, but it's I don't know, it's difficult to grasp.
Yeah,
in its
I really
entirety.
only remember. Okay, I'll explain 3 moments I remember. One was when something they actually did was like the people who like organized the retreat like contacted like your friends and family and had them like write you like letters.
Oh yeah.
And then they like handed them to you at like a particular time on the
Wow.
retreat. So I received like all of these like amazing, deep, heartfelt letters from like friends and family.
I wonder what your buddy was thinking when he invited you on the retreat, and you were like, "Actually, I might get initiated in my fraternity." It's like, we got all these letters.
Yeah.
Like,
I already wrote this for you.
Oh, that's a good point.
Signed it, sealed it.
It's like, dang, man, what do we do with all these?
burn them. That's what we do. Doesn't get them.
Yeah, but so I remember reading like some letters from my friends, basically saying like, they like really admired that I was like striving to live a moral life in the way that I knew, even though I like wasn't Catholic like them.
Yeah.
And they were actually like, oh, like I actually kind of look up to you in that sense. And I was like, oh, wow, like I never thought that anyone would have looked up to me there. I always thought they were the cool moral Catholics, and I was like the
So wait, did you always?
Screw up,
So
but-
did you always? Yeah. Is that really how you viewed your role in that social group? Like,
Yeah, I suppose I always felt a little bit like I was different because just because I like wasn't Catholic, and I suppose part of me thought that they were like judging me for that so I suppose I kind of realized through reading some of these letters that that's not how they felt about me at all. And they actually saw a lot of positive qualities in me, and they like actually looked up to me in many ways.
wow, that's awesome.
And I was like, oh, yeah, that was at the moment I realized I'm like, oh, okay, I have some true friends here. And
Yeah.
Because
No.
I think a lot of people accuse Christians of making them feel less,
mhm.
and I'm sure that happens from time to time. But I mean, your story right there is a beautiful testament to the fact that those people who are not Christian but have friends who are Christian don't have to feel like that their Christian brothers and sisters are looking at them as less. Like, they're friends
No.
with you because they see something valuable in you. They don't look at you as like a fixer-upper or a
Exactly.
project. It's like,
Yeah,
it's
well,
like no, like people are friends with people because they see something good in them and they admire, and they also want it for
And for the
themselves.
person that
Exactly.
they are, not for who they might be or what they could contribute.
yeah,
or whatever.
exactly. I think that's a great way of wording it. Is like I could see that they just wanted to be friends with me, like for the person who I was at that time, and not because like they had this deep ulterior motive to make me Catholic.
Yeah.
Even though no doubt they wanted me to
Right.
to be Catholic,
But that's
as
because-
as they should.
Right.
But like I could tell that even if I had never become Catholic, that wouldn't have necessarily hurt our like friendship, and they still would have loved me. So that meant a lot to me.
That's beautiful.
I think.
Wow, great friends.
And yeah, I strive to be like that too. So that was the one moment I remember. The other moment I remember was adoration. I had no idea what adoration was at the time. I'll be honest. I don't think anybody even explained what the Eucharist was to me. We literally just like went into like the chapel, and they said, "Okay, you're gonna sit down here and you're gonna pray for an hour," and then it was just silence, and they just let us be. And they exposed the Eucharist. I didn't really look at that because I didn't know what was going on. I was just like, "Oh, that's just something happening over there." Like, honestly, I don't even really remember it. But looking back on it, that was like, it wasn't necessarily like the craziest, most powerful experience that I was like expecting, like what I was talking about before, the kind of experience that I would have to have. But what I did experience was like a deep sense of like peace and knowing that God was actually watching over me and was like willing to like guide me, grant me consolation and the things that I was experiencing. And so that was the first time in my life I really actually like prayed to God or talked to God without thinking like this is stupid. Let me stop. Like he's not real. Like
Wow.
so I actually like tried it and just experienced like some deep consolation. And I think no doubt, like the presence of the Blessed Sacrament like probably played some
for
role
sure.
in there too, even if I didn't like realize it.
Did you receive the letter from your friends and family before adoration?
That's a good question. I don't remember.
You remember? Okay.
No, I don't remember.
Right. But I mean, there's something to be said because I run retreats at my high school with some coworkers, and it's always like, what do we do for the last night of the retreat? Like, what type of prayer experience do we have? And I just love the answer that my friend gives, Katie. She's like, let's just keep it simple. Like, just do adoration,
Yes, exactly.
Let Jesus be Jesus. And even you, like, had no idea what was going on.
I don't think anybody even explained it to me.
But it still had a
Which
profound impact.
seems wrong now. I'm like, someone should have said something.
Yeah,
but
someone should have mentioned, like,
probably.
hey, guys, this thing is, like, the God of the entire cosmos, okay, the creator of the
we are not worshiping bread.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a really profound beauty though too in what you're sharing of the experience, both of Reese and I grew up Catholic, but the experience of someone who just has no idea basically, and yet you can still kind of feel the peace from the sound of it. Like you can still sense that there's something, even if you're like, I don't know what that is that's going on over there. That's that thing. But like, but then you sit there and you pray and you're like, yeah, there's peace here. Like there is something going on there that I think is just beautiful. I mean, sure, like obviously I'm sure it would have been better if someone explained it, but it is also just a beautiful testimony to the Eucharist and to our Lord.
Of course. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so that was the second experience. Third experience was at the very end of the retreat. They actually had it almost sounds like hazing, but it's not, I promise. They literally like blindfolded you. And then they had someone like come up to you and they kind of like, I'm trying to remember if they
Wouldn't
like.
it be funny if your fraternity showed up and just initiated you? Actually, this is your fraternity initiation, not a retreat. Sorry.
Oh my gosh.
That's what I was imagining when you said they blindfolded
Right at the
you.
end of the
That would've
retreat.
been
Yeah.
That would have been crazy, but
So yeah, they blindfolded
I'm
you.
trying to remember. I think they may have like patted me on the shoulder or something, or just put their hand on my shoulder. And this person who theoretically you don't know who they are. Although when this person started talking, I knew exactly who it was because it was a friend of mine. It was basically talking about like how much God loved me, how much God cared for me, how much He wanted a relationship for me, how Jesus died for me, all these things. At least this is what I remember. And I learned he had actually been like praying for me like the entire retreat. Like I was like his assigned.
Oh, sweet. Yeah.
I was like his
Christ.
assigned person to pray for.
Awesome.
And like so he like prayed like he like stayed up like through the night like praying for me.
What a man.
He was up at like 2 or 3 in the morning,
What
like
a
praying for me.
man.
Wow. That's
'Cause,
beautiful.
Another thing about retreats is sometimes you don't get a whole lot of sleep. So
I mean,
you might as well stay up and pray.
Especially
pray
the
for
organizers,
retreats,
though,
I
too.
guess,
Sometimes
but-
you do that. You stay up to pray or do things like that. Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so that was really powerful for me. It was actually one of my roommates who was like praying for me, and so yeah, just knowing that he really cared for me, and wow, he did that for me. That means so much. So that and the letters and the peace I experienced overall, it was like a good retreat. The negative was that I did not come away with the conviction that I had to be Catholic or that Catholicism was the true religion. But I did come. Yeah, it's okay. That comes later. But like,
I know it's funny because I feel like if somebody was listening, they would think like, oh yeah, and then like he came back and he decided he was going to join the Catholic Church. Like at that point, like
He's gonna become a priest and like
he has a vocation. No, that didn't happen. But I did come away from the retreat thinking like, yeah, like faith is important, and I actually want to make this a bigger part of my life. That was pretty much the extent of what I took away. Was I wanted to be a bigger part of my life than it was at that point. So that lasted for like 3 weeks probably. And the retreat high was pretty real. I fell off like very fast.
Okay. I'm sure just being initiated too in a fraternity.
I started doing some stuff with the fraternity. started dating a girl also that kind of like got me off track. I studied abroad in the summer.
Where'd you go?
I went to Sydney, Australia.
Oh, nice.
Dang, I don't think you've
Yeah.
ever told me about that.
Really?
That's cool.
Yeah. So I went in the summer going into my junior year.
Wow, that must have been fun. Was it like study abroad, like academics, or was it just like
So
having
it was
fun, or
actually
like what?
it was a unique program kind of. It was a study abroad internship program. So basically, they like set me up with an internship at this accounting firm in the city that I would work at like 2 days a week. And then the other days I was like taking like an international business class or something. And then the other free time I was just having fun with.
Dude,
You know,
that sounds
the guys and-
awesome.
Yeah, no, it was really great. But I was not going, like I said, I was not going to mass or anything. My faith was kind of just, I've kind of forgotten about pursuing faith.
Yeah,
At that point, I got distracted.
That's important. We'll get back to that. But like being around Aussies for like a couple.
Yeah.
How long was it again? The whole program?
It was 7 weeks.
7 weeks. Okay.
Yeah,
alright.
Nice, that's
7 weeks.
awesome.
Are they like hilarious people?
Yeah, they're pretty funny. Their accents are pretty cool. I would
Dude,
say.
it's
They-
Australians
they
and New
have-
Zealanders whose accents
their
just add
accents are
so much humor.
They have a lot of interesting like shortened names for things like McDonald's. They would call like Macca's.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you say Macos?
Macca's.
Macca's.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
Like
Yeah.
breakfast, they would call like brekkie.
Brekkie. So
Yeah, so I'd be like, I'm gonna go get brekkie at Macca's today.
Brekkie and Macca's. I love
I felt so dumb saying that.
No, that sounds great.
Are you
should
saying
start
Australians
saying
are
that.
dumb? No, my kids watch that show Bluey.
Oh yeah,
With
of course.
the Australian dogs and like they're anthropomorphized or whatever, and they say things like brekkie, like I want some brekkie, or like you being cheeky,
Yeah.
you being a little cheeky. Oh my gosh,
Yeah, so
that's so funny.
Did you take any like I don't know like trips or anything while you were there, or like
Yeah.
go into the outback at all or anything like that? Or?
the one big trip I remember was we went to the Australia Zoo. That's actually run by like the Irwin family. Steve
okay.
Irwin.
Oh,
the-
wait, what?
The
Crocodile
animal guy.
Hunter.
His
Yeah.
family? Yeah, no, I know. That's wild.
Yeah,
I didn't
so
realize they,
he died.
wow.
He died a while ago.
Well,
But
yeah,
his
I
family,
know.
his family is still running the.
when you were there?
zoo.
He had died already. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How old was? How old were? How
I
old
know
were we
that's what
when
I
he
was just
died?
thinking because I think
he
I was
died
like
in
an
like
early teenager.
2006 or something.
It's been
So
that
it was,
long.
It was
It's
pretty.
been
Well,
long
that
almost
would make
20
sense. I would
years.
have been 13, so that sounds about right.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
But that was a
Wow.
very fun experience. They
Chase
had.
was 7 in 2006.
I know.
Hey.
Chase is a baby compared to Peter.
Sorry, I'm not like 40 like you. Yeah, so that was a fun experience, but yeah, did a lot of fun things, but yeah, faith kind of on the back burner.
Mm-hmm.
Got back to school junior year. Yeah, started like dating this girl. Kind of just won't go into too much detail. Let's just say like faith was not a priority in that, and I felt kind of like drove me away. Any impulses I had in me to like check out a church or explore faith, I felt like I was kind of just like moved away from that. And so that was not good. But
Did you view it as like restrictive? Like if you were to consider that, like that faith to be, or at least give yourself to it?
no, not necessarily. Like I was still like open and curious. It was more of like the person that I was with was maybe not as interested
Oh,
and
I
kind of discouraged me. It was like, okay, well, I guess I won't check it out then. It's not
Yeah.
that important for
I
now.
don't want to ruin this relationship.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But anyway, so that relationship ran its course. By the end of the first semester, we were not dating anymore, which was good. And it actually kind of like freed me up the next semester to actually like reorganize my priorities in a sense. And so yeah, this was like a year after the Catholic retreat I went on. I finally kind of came back and was like thinking, well, maybe now's the time, kind of. There's no reason why I couldn't explore this.
Were your friends with you throughout all this, like this year of kind of stepping away?
Yeah, no, they were all still with me
That's awesome.
during this time. Helping
Yeah,
me
and that's
through it.
another testament to what you were saying, right? That like it wasn't like when you kind of, you kind of went on that retreat, but then you didn't like pursue Catholicism. They weren't just like, oh well, I guess it's not working out. We may as well just ditch him. Like,
yeah, no.
they cared about you as a person and as a friend, and so they still,
Yeah, no, I never felt like they were leaving me or would have left me. But yeah, so I kind of got back on the horse and was like, well, let me like check this out some more, I suppose. And yeah, that was confirmed by, like COVID kind of happening right around then, actually, where I just noticed that I would say like I maybe had like certain idols in my life that kind of came down at that point. For example, like sports, I was really into like watching basketball. And I would just,
Men's basketball.
I felt
That's an inside joke from the episode that we did.
not women's
Yeah,
basketball.
where we were talking about women's basketball. With
Well, you don't miss
Brian.
the high flying
I
action.
don't know who would idolize women's basketball.
Yeah, I don't know who that would
I
be.
question whoever is doing that, but
You guys are gonna make me an apologist
sorry,
to women's basketball.
no
now.
disrespect to women's basketball, but so then like all the games were canceled and stuff, and I was like, well, this sucks. What do I do now?
No March
Kinda.
Madness.
Yeah, no March Madness. Like I would go to like all of the Purdue games.
But yeah, they're ranked typically pretty high.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
they were in the national championship last year. So they're
They've
very
won in
good.
the last like 10 years, haven't they?
No,
Did they not?
they've actually never won. I don't believe.
Oh, really?
yeah.
Oh, man, okay.
But they
'Cause
came-
they've definitely
they
been
came
ranked
very
high
close
multiple times in my
They're
lifetime.
always ranked high, but they
okay.
always blow it. Basically, that's another story.
That sucks.
We'll have a separate podcast to
Yeah.
talk about Purdue basketball.
Indie-handed.
But anyway, so yeah, there's just this big interest of mine that then it's like suddenly, okay, nothing's going on with it anymore. Now where do I direct my time? Don't know what to do here, kind of. I had also had like an internship lined up for the summer that was then kind of like rescinded at the last minute because of COVID.
Right.
And so that was disappointing as well. So I found a different job for the summer, like working at a grocery store, but it was a lot less.
During the pandemic.
Yeah, working at a grocery store during the pandemic. I really did not like it, but the positive thing was it was actually it was not as many hours as like the internship would have been. I think it was maybe only like 25, 30 hours a week or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
What were you doing at the grocery store? Were you like bagging stuff or?
I worked in e-commerce, so basically the people who
Ew.
wanted online orders because they were afraid or
Oh,
not
I
able
guess
to go
during
into the
COVID,
store.
yeah.
Into the
Well,
store.
That's kind of mellow. You just get a list and you have to just go find the things.
Yeah,
right?
they would just give me a list and I would go and pick all the orders.
So
and
wait,
bring it
okay.
out to people.
So
I love the hand motion too.
we might be getting off track.
That's
You-
okay.
No, that's okay. That's
the-
fine. That's
what
the
we do
point.
on
We do that,
podcasts,
yeah.
So my wife, especially when she was really pregnant with our most recent child, when I'd be gone at work and like we would need groceries and I would be home too late, so she would have to really get fresh food to make dinner. She would do like that, like
Oh,
just
like ordering
or just
delivery
pick up,
whatever.
yeah.
Or pick up, yeah.
And a lot of the times, sometimes if they don't have the product, they'll put in like a substitute.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So what's the judgment call there? Because sometimes people make the dumbest decisions. Like Emily's like, yeah, I asked for non-fat milk and they just replaced it with almond milk. Like I clearly would have accepted fat. Actually, we don't do non-fat milk. We're like straight whole milk. But like, it's like, oh, like the substitute sometimes just makes no sense.
Well, that's why
whatsoever.
like I've ordered from a grocery store near here a few times, and they actually have an option on there where like when you're ordering, you can add in your own substitutes of like what you would
Yeah.
want them to substitute.
Yeah.
I think Wise or whatever. We've always had a problem with them. Like the 2 times we've used them, it's like, oh wow, they just screwed up the substitute. So yeah, so walk me through. Like, someone orders brown sugar. Okay, there's no brown sugar. What do you do?
I probably just wouldn't get him anything, honestly.
Okay.
Is
Alright.
there really a good substitute for brown sugar?
Yeah,
I
you
don't know.
get white sugar and you just put a little dirt in it. Mix it up.
I'm glad they didn't hire you.
You get them.
Wait, but
you get them
did you-
cinnamon. That's simple. You just get them
Oh,
cinnamon.
that's true. Mix some white sugar and cinnamon. That would look like sort of like brown sugar.
You know, yeah. Honestly,
Did
I-
you
Caramelize
did you
it a
have to
little,
do
like-
substitutes though sometimes? Like, did you?
Yeah, I don't think it was like that frequent. We mostly had the stuff in stock,
Nice.
unless someone was like trying to order like Clorox wipes or something.
Yeah,
Oh,
or
those
toilet
were
yeah,
all
of
out
course.
stock.
during
or,
COVID, it
or
was
like
like,
paper
oh
towels
my
or something.
gosh.
I'm like, sorry, not exactly a substitute for that. We're just out of that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Oh my gosh. Okay,
Um,
cool. So was that kind of like a mellow gig though?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty chill. I didn't, yeah, I didn't have a lot of like friends that worked there or anything. It was also really annoying because, yeah, I mean, we were all like masked up, obviously.
Yeah, I was
that was
just
just,
thinking
like-
of that. I was
That was
oh,
particularly difficult.
I hated
for
teaching
me.
with a mask.
'Cause I would get like headaches a lot
Yeah.
wearing the mask.
Oh, yeah.
You're
Oh,
gonna get
yeah.
sore
because I'm-
throats, and you're like, "Oh, do I have a sore throat because of COVID?" And you're like, "Nope, it's because of the mask. That's why I have a sore throat."
Yeah,
'cause
so
you're breathing your own nasty
mhm.
Yeah.
toxins back in all the time.
Yeah, so I was never really into all that stuff, but
Yeah.
I put up with it
Yeah.
for the summer. But anyway, why that's relevant is that
Sorry,
that
yeah.
freed me up to like pursue faith a little more. So I would kind of go home, and I have always been kind of an internet kid. I like with my cup stacking, I had like a YouTube channel when I was like 8 years old and was like posting YouTube videos. And I was just I was on the internet a lot as a kid. Like I know I mentioned I was doing all that other stuff too, which was all good. But I also spent a lot of time on the computer and like browsing YouTube in particular. So I kind of developed an addiction almost to just like always being on YouTube in my free time. I'm surfing videos or whatever. But ironically enough, God actually kind of used that for my like faith journey. In that one day I kind of just realized I'm like, well, if I have questions about the faith, like, why don't I just like look them up on YouTube? And so I like started watching like Christian versus like atheist debates and stuff like that.
Nice.
I mean, if we want to get into like particular people,
Yeah,
please. Yes, we
the
do.
first person I really listened to was this guy who was actually not Catholic; he's like Protestant. But his name was Frank Turek was his name.
Oh, okay.
He has a lot of he has like a ministry on YouTube and does a lot of talks and has a lot of good arguments for like why God exists and arguing for things like the resurrection and stuff like that. So I started listening to him and maybe like a few others, and it was at that point I realized that faith could be intellectual. Like I had no idea. Really. I thought like
Was that because of your public school upbringing, or at least the part? Because you said you said previously that your public school like faith was just kind of spoken, or at least religion.
I mean it was never talked. Well, it was only talked about in a negative sense. Really all I remember learning about the Catholic Church in like U.S. history class, for example, or history class was like, that they like sold indulgences,
The Crusades.
and the Crusades, and then there was the Enlightenment, and then we got out of the dark ages of the church running everything.
We broke the shackles, right?
Yeah, we broke the shackles of religion.
How's that going? Well, how's that
was
going?
holding
How's
us
that
back.
going right now?
How's that going, world?
Yeah, so.
That is interesting though, because I thought of that when you were talking about when you went on that retreat as a high schooler, and you were kind of like, well, I didn't have this experience. That makes sense to me now what you're saying, because it sounded like you were kind of viewing it back then as like the only part of faith was like the experience aspect,
Yeah.
and obviously there's a both and, like we have to have some degree of belief and all that, but there's also the reason aspect too.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I did not realize that your faith could be backed up by like evidence. So that was the first time I like started realizing that. Up until that point, I was basically like, I was sympathetic to my like Catholic friends. Like I said, we aligned on like certain moral values, and I respected them. I had no ill will towards them for like choosing to be Catholic. But at the end of the day, I was like, is there really any real evidence that any of the things that you say about your faith are true? Was Jesus even real? How can we even know that? How can we know for certain God is actually even real? Like the Bible, what it says about all of these things that supposedly happened in both the Old and the New Testament. Like, how can we actually know that's real and it's not just a bunch of made up stories that people then choose to believe in because it makes them like feel better and helps them live a better life, I suppose, and be happy. So I suppose that was kind of how I viewed it at that point. Like, I knew that they were happier people than me, but I still thought, like, well, maybe I can have the same joy, like, without God. But then it was through the intellectual side of the faith that I realized, it didn't have to all be, it wasn't just all like I'm accepting it blindly. Like, there's actually like reasonable evidence for these things. And I was always a very logical, analytical, truth-seeking person. I'm an introvert. That's the stuff that I like really liked. Like, you know, I didn't trust mainstream news because I thought it was all, you know, I thought they're all lying to me, and I would go and search for what the actual truth was. Like, I was that kind of person. So it was only a matter of time before I realized I'd been lied to about Christianity, and sort of discovered that through apologetics on the internet.
Wow. That's awesome. So what was like, was there like a video you watched, you're like, and it was like the light turns on?
Yeah.
Like, you're like, holy crap. Or was it like just a slow build up over time?
I think I can remember at least one moment that was like that was like just a light switch moment. Yeah, where this guy who I mentioned was making an argument for the existence of God. He said something very simple. He kind of made like the moral argument, which is that, if you're not familiar with it, is basically God is the moral lawgiver. So there's such a thing as objective morality in this world, meaning that something is wrong regardless of whether like you or I like believe it's wrong. Like, there's actually like an objective standard above all of us that says whether something's wrong. And he was like, well, that's God. Like, and since almost all of us, you know, some people may deny it, but like all of us almost to some degree believe in some sort of like objective morality, or things that are objectively morally wrong. And so that was something that made clear sense to me of like, oh, actually, like, yeah, I've always believed that there are things that are like wrong in this world objectively, regardless of what you say about it. Like, I know it's wrong, but it's like, why do you know that? How can you prove that? Well, because God says so.
Right.
God says so, and he's written it on our hearts.
Right. I mean, that's the argument C.S. Lewis gives in Mere Christianity. Yeah, and it's had a big impact on people. It's funny you mentioned that that's the argument that had an impact on you, because you stated previously that your friends from college, you said you had, despite not having the same faith background as them, you guys had the same morals, and that's kind of what brought you guys together.
I wouldn't say exactly the same,
right?
But
No,
we had similar morals. It was close enough,
right?
I suppose, yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's interesting to hear someone say they're pro-life when, I mean, I don't have any reasons. I don't know any really good arguments that would explain why someone who doesn't believe in God would not be pro-life. But that just doesn't tend to be the case nowadays, you know? And so I was that you seem to have been aware of this objective morality written on your heart from like a younger age. And so that would explain why that argument kind of just resonated so well with you.
Yeah, and the reason it was kind of a light bulb moment was because it was so simple, and I remember thinking to myself, like, was it really that simple? like why was I trying to complicate it? Why did people make it seem like this was so complicated? Furthermore, like, why did I never learn this in school? Like, nobody even ever posited this argument to me. And I'm like, I don't know, to me that proved God right away. I'm like, there were other arguments too, but I was just like, how can anybody like really listen to this and like not agree with it, kind of. There are people that don't, but it was just so powerful for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense too. Haven't you used something like that with your students sometimes, of like the just the logical sense of thinking about, you know, people will try to think in a very like morally relativistic sense of like, oh, well, I can have my morals and you have yours. But then you'll be like, well, but is it okay for me to go kill you? Like,
yeah.
Or I just have to be like, why can't I kill you? Yeah, exactly.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you ask that question and the person's like, well, that's wrong. Like, you can't just kill me. And it's like, well, but why? Like what if my morality says that I can kill you, then why is it wrong? Like,
Yeah.
there has to be something objective there. There has to be something more. Like, that's really interesting.
Yeah, the problem with that nowadays is people are becoming more narcissistic. So the morality is narcissistic. It's ego-centered. So they have an issue with them bearing the brunt of an immoral act. But when it comes to someone else they don't know, they're not as concerned. Like a thought experiment I do with them all the time is, would you kill patient 0 for the COVID pandemic? Whether or not you think it was like a serious virus or whatever, but to prevent the pandemic, like the government shutdown and not the government shutdown, but the world shutting down. If you could prevent that from happening by just killing this one person, would you? About 90% of my kids say they would.
Well, but that's also just like that's been a problem for a long time, I think, because that's but that argument though is using the classic flawed moral reasoning of like
utilitarian.
The utilitarian thing of it's better to kill one than many or whatever, and so like, oh, it's okay to kill that person because that prevents a bunch of other people from being hurt or whatever.
Right, but their morality, it's unfortunately why is it bad to kill someone? Like it's working a little bit still, but it's not as effective as it used to be.
Well, and I was very familiar with that argument too, with like abortion, because I was pro-life, and I'd hear people, say things like that, like, oh well, if we just, if this baby is then killed, well then we're gonna avoid, them having a rough life or something like that.
Yeah, and
I'm just like, but like every life is sacred. So I couldn't articulate all the theology of it, but I'm just like, oh, like I know this.
Every
is
human has
I know you can't just like kill one person to save many more.
Well, and I think I will say to Reese bringing that up, I find that fascinating that like you clearly, I was already kind of thinking that, and you just said it out loud that like, I think you must have somehow, whether it was from your parents or something you just intuited at some point, but the recognition that a baby in the womb is a life, because I think that's the big thing I see with people who, like, the one main argument to me for why a lot of people who don't believe in God logically might be, pro-choice or whatever, they're not in favor of preventing abortions, is because for them, they don't see it as, I've talked to tons of people who don't see the child in the womb as a life. And so then in their mind, you're not actually doing anything bad because it's not a life yet.
Yeah.
So it's not a big deal.
Makes sense.
And so logically, if it's not a life, that would make sense. But you have to that's where we have to realize that science itself actually shows that. But the point is that more about the fact that it's interesting to me that you kind of, as someone who wasn't really religious at all for, till you were whatever in college or whatever, had this kind of inherent sense of there's something more there. Even in the life sense,
yeah, I mean, like I said, I was a logical person. Like, someone's trying to tell me that's not a human being, and then I'm like, well, actually, you can see it has feet and toes and a heart, and this is clearly like you're an idiot. This is clearly a human. This is what I was thinking. Yeah. And like I said, I do believe the moral law is written on our hearts, and so I was just able to recognize it, I suppose, but. But
so that argument really appealed.
Yeah, it's okay.
So those videos.
What happened next? Yeah, I started listening to arguments like that. Became pretty convinced the existence of God. Then I started looking into maybe more Christian specific things, because I realized I'm okay, here are some of the claims that Christianity makes. Is that one, Jesus is a real person who lived. That he's fully man and fully God, that he was crucified, and then he was resurrected. Those are kind of the main things I was looking at. And just hearing really good arguments for the resurrection, especially. I remember one argument that really stuck out to me was just the fact that all of the well, I shouldn't say all. 11 of the 12 apostles, right, except for John, who survived, were all martyred for their faith. Yeah. Really their testimony that that they saw the risen Jesus. Mm-hmm. And to me, that just made that was almost very clear evidence. I was yeah, I mean, there's even more than just the apostles. You look all throughout the history of Christianity, many more martyrs came after that too, but in particular those who were closely with Jesus then being willing to die for their belief that they had seen him risen, which is very powerful. And I couldn't really explain why you would die for a lie. If they knew that it was a lie, why would they be willing to die for it? Like someone saying, renounce this belief or I'll kill you, and you're lying, you should just be like, all right, I was lying. Don't kill me.
Yeah, especially when they're like their lives actually got worse.
Oh yeah, they gain. That's the other thing. They gain nothing worldly from it. No worldly prestige or anything. Yeah. And so it just made no sense to me really, and I couldn't. Again, that was another one of those things. I was like, oh, how did no one like tell me about this? Like this actually seems like pretty simple. But
so this is just summer between junior and senior year of college.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So came to believe in like the resurrection. I would hear other arguments of like, oh, like maybe the apostles all like hallucinated and
yeah.
or maybe there was a double of Jesus. Like there's all these other like wacky theories out there.
Yeah. I don't know anyone who really takes those points seriously anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there are some allegedly intellectual people who make arguments like that, and I'm like, no, that's just not right. But
I mean, some of that's kind of like you said about like, oh, it was this simple all along. Some of that's like the principle of like Occam's razor, that like the most obvious answer is probably the right answer, like
the simplest answer.
Yeah, the simplest answer. Like you don't need to like go into all these contortions of like, oh, well, maybe it was that there was a double or they were all hallucinating the same thing at the same time. Like, well, that's really complicated. Why don't you just assume that what they were saying is actually true? Like,
yeah,
it's a lot easier that way. It makes more sense.
So I took it at face value. And yeah, that was when it really hit me, because I was like, oh, well, so if this man resurrected and he claimed to be God and he foretold his resurrection and all of these things, then that means like he has authority over me in some sense, and that like what he says, if he's God and what he says is good, what he commands to do, like I should do. And if I'm not, then I'm just blatantly like disobeying God. And so that was kind of the more interior conversion, I suppose, in the way I was living. It kind of started after that, where I was like, okay, I need to actually like give my life to Jesus. Now, I didn't really know how to like do that.
Like, got a computer watching YouTube, right? Okay,
yeah, it was really like I'm just watching YouTube videos, and one day I'm like, man, I need to do it. What do I do again? I was like, do I just say it right now? Or is there like a formal process or something? Right. I didn't really know what to do. But I probably just said some prayer and was like, Jesus, I believe you, give my life to you. Something like that.
I mean, that's honestly good.
Yeah, it's good. I don't really remember, but I remember like being at that point I was like, okay, I'm a Christian. But then I was immediately like, wait, but then what does that mean? Okay, it means I follow Christ. Okay, but what does Christ tell me to do? Well, he says to do these things. Okay, what about these other things that are not like listed in Scripture and what we know of what Jesus said? Like, what do I do about like those things? Who decides that?
Like,
how do I
an
actually
example of what you're thinking of? Like, because I'm assuming you say Christian, follow Christ. Like, okay, let's look at his teachings.
Yeah.
Okay. But then you're asking a question about the other things that Christians do that are not explicitly in Scripture. Like,
sure. For I guess for example, one may be, okay, here's an example, like contraception, for example. The Catholic Church says that using birth control, using contraception is like always immoral. But I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't believe that's necessarily like implicitly stated in Scripture. You can maybe stretch and find something to support it, but it's,
Yeah, I mean, there's one place that's referenced typically where St. Paul, I'm trying to remember exactly what he says, but there's a Greek word that he uses to describe something you shouldn't do that's considered to have been a chemical form of like abortion, sort of. So I
Okay.
guess you could consider that like similar to contraception, but it's not the same thing ultimately. So yeah, as far as I know, there's nowhere in the scriptures where that's like really.
Isn't there an Old Testament
explicitly.
story about a man who intentionally spills out his seed?
That's true.
That
Yeah.
God
Right.
strikes him down.
Yes,
But
that is
Yeah,
true.
that's like the sin of onanism, which I think is different from contraception, or maybe it's
Wait,
one.
no,
maybe
it's
one form
actually
of
that
it.
is a Reese's, right. That's an argument that's
Okay.
used sometimes.
What's onanism? What'd you call it?
Yeah, what is
onanism. Isn't it the name of the guy?
That might
who
be the
did
name of
that?
the guy,
Onan?
but like,
But what would the ism be?
What's
Like,
the
what's
ism
the-
be? What do you mean?
like actually like spilling your seed.
Oh yeah, it is
Yeah.
a form of contraception.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Well, but it is a form of contraception, yeah, because
Okay.
that's because the idea is that I mean that's yeah.
How explicit do we
All
want
right,
to get here?
I know. It's like let's not go any further.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So anyway, that was.
But in
that's the
general,
example
to
I
your
think
point,
of.
in general,
Yeah.
that's not explicitly laid out in a really obvious way. Like you couldn't just read the scriptures and like and just be like, oh yeah, he obviously. It's not like Jesus saying like,
Yeah.
Especially when like the birth control
Don't
pill was
kill.
created by a Catholic priest.
Was it really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
no. Lord have mercy.
Yeah.
exactly.
Right. But yeah. So how did you come about? Did you just go back to YouTube? And you're like,
How
well,
do you reconcile
what do we do
these
about
questions about
contraception?
like this
So-
isn't in scripture? How do I deal with
So
it?
basically, I came to the realization quickly that various people who call themselves Christians disagreed on many things.
what?
Yeah, like many things, things even seemingly like very basic. And it's like, okay, well, it quickly became like this label of Christian must be deeper than this. Like I need to know in particular, like what to follow and
Yeah.
what's actually true.
Mhm.
And so again, more research being done. So I basically spent, as I went into my senior year, I paid particular attention to like discerning between like Protestantism and Catholicism in particular. And I was maybe a little more sympathetic or leaning towards Catholicism because I had like friends that were Catholic.
Yeah.
However, I was also very stubborn in that, like, you know, I wanted to be my own person and I didn't want to just be Catholic because they were Catholic, because that's not a testimony, right? Like, imagine I just got on this mic and I said, well, my friends were cool Catholics, so I became a cool Catholic. Like, okay, you could see how that could happen, but that's really not a great reason to be Catholic just because you saw some other people doing it and you thought it was cool. Like, I wanted...
Well, and I think, sorry, just to like
Yeah.
comment on that, I think to your point, like there's nothing inherently wrong with that if that's the first step.
Sure, yeah.
But that
Sorry,
would never be
I should be
enough
more
to like.
clear.
But that would never be enough to have an actual foundation. Like
Right,
if that's all you do, you're gonna like
Everyone
fall away
else
from
was
that
doing
pretty
it,
quickly.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
thank you
So
for the clarification.
just to like, yeah,
no, yeah,
that, I think
and
that's what you were
that
getting
was
at
that was
yeah.
a step for me. Was first I had to recognize they were cool and and that they loved me. But then after that, I was like, yeah, I need a more solid foundation of this. I need to know it's true. So I basically spent that whole year, like, you know, when I wasn't doing schoolwork or other like fun things or whatever, I was just trying to like do research and answer some of my questions about the faith. Started like reading more books, still doing like YouTube videos and stuff like that. Having more intentional conversations with some of my Catholic friends about faith, you know, whereas before, if they would bring up religion or something about their faith, I'd kind of just tune out and be like, well, I don't know anything. It's not important for me. I started to be more like inquisitive and asking more questions. I was also involved in a Bible study too. I can't believe I glossed over that. That was actually
that's right.
that
You
was
have
actually a
told me
big
about
part
that.
of that was actually a big part of my journey too. Was my junior and senior year. Even all throughout that time that I was like, like dating that girl who I was like not as interested in faith at the time. Like, my friend had actually invited me into Bible study, and so I would go just because it was fun to be with the guys, not necessarily because I liked reading the Bible or anything. But I was actually doing that consistently for like my junior year, my senior year.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
believe it or not. So
That's awesome.
but pretty much for like the first year, I pretty much didn't like say a word almost. I was like, at least not about the faith in particular, because I was just like, I'm so dumb. These people are so smart. Like, I don't want to embarrass myself. Yeah, I don't want to demonstrate my lack of knowledge and make an idiot of myself. So I'm just gonna like sit back and listen.
Yeah.
But yeah, my senior year, I just got really into like wanting to find the truth, asking more questions. Started to get a little more involved in the Catholic community somewhat. My friends would invite me to something, and I actually more inclined to say yes. I eventually, once I had pretty much decided I like wanted to be Catholic, I then started going to like mass. But I actually wasn't. I don't know. This is kind of an interesting thing that I did that I wouldn't necessarily recommend to other people. But like as I was discerning between Catholicism and any of the 1,000 Protestant denominations, I made it a point to like not really go to church or like any church, like Catholic, Baptist, Lutheran,
Until
whatever,
you had figured out.
until I had figured it out, because at that point I had realized like it's actually about truth and it's not about the experience. And so I didn't. Whereas before I was kind of like just waiting for an experience. Now I was like, well, I don't want the experience to like cloud my judgment on like what's actually true. So I'm just not gonna. So I'm just not gonna go.
Okay.
Interesting.
In hindsight, like I probably someone probably should have pushed me to like still go to mass and stuff, but it all worked out eventually. But like once I became convicted of Catholicism, then I was like all in. Then I'm like, all right, now I'm going to mass every Sunday. Haven't stopped since then. Like,
So was that a gradual realization, or was there a light bulb moment for that realization of Catholicism?
yeah, it was definitely gradual. It took me like almost the whole school year.
Okay.
I didn't really decide until probably like a month or two before I graduated. But yeah, a couple of important moments. Yeah, I think one moment in particular was I remember I was like out with some of my friends who were like all Catholic, and we were out having drinks at a bar, and I was like, well, guys, just tell me why I should be Catholic. I was almost like begging them. I was like why should I
Convince me,
I was like,
right?
why should I be Catholic and not anything else? Like I'm like at a loss, and I've been like searching, and I feel like I'm like close, but like can you just like help me basically? They mentioned something about, I don't remember exactly what they said. One guy mentioned something about like apostolic succession, and well, yeah, because it's the true church, which is a valid point.
Yeah.
I don't know if I fully understood what he was saying at the time, but it was a valid point. They probably said some other things too. Honestly, I don't really remember. But I do remember walking away out of the bar, and my friend just kind of saying like, all right, I'm just gonna ask like, why aren't you doing it? Like, why aren't you Catholic? Like, and I said something like, I still have questions. And he was just kind of like, I still have questions too. And I'm still Catholic. Like, I actually don't understand like everything. But he was almost saying that like I didn't have to have like all of the knowledge of everything. Mm-hmm. And that actually like faith helps to like fill in the gaps there.
Yeah.
And not everyone needs a degree in theology.
Exactly. I was treating it like I was going to be like the smartest, best apologist in the world, and I had to know. I had to know an answer to everything.
Yeah.
Before I could like comfortably say I wanted to be Catholic. And he was kind of like, actually, no, you don't. Like, here are some fundamental truths you should believe in. If you got those, like, okay, there's all these other things about the faith that you'll come to understand with time. There's also some things you could never understand, but like that's okay. I was like,
that's really interesting to me, because I feel like there's definitely a degree of humility that comes with like recognizing that we'll never know all the things. Like we'll never, because even the most seasoned theologian would tell you that there's still things that they're not going to know, that they're still never going to understand. But it's also interesting because I think that kind of makes sense that you would think that, because that you would have like wanted to know all the things. I think we live in a world today that often like tries to encourage us to know everything about something before we like, can say that we are really that thing, or that we've mastered that thing or whatever. And so you would have that same tendency of like, oh, well, I shouldn't like do this, right? Unless I'm like 100% sure and I know all the things and I've like answered all my questions. That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's an unrealistic expectation that seems to have been birthed from empiricism or the Enlightenment. It's like certainty. That's when you encounter truth, and it's like, whenever are you actually certain? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if you're not certain, you can't be comfortable, and it's like, oh, I wonder why we're so anxious all the time. It's like, so that must have been extremely liberating to have your friend say that to you.
Yeah, it kind of was. And after that, he actually gave me a book called Rome Sweet Home by Scott Hahn.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what? Who? No,
you know all about him.
Never heard of Scott Hahn before.
Yeah, so he gave me this book, and for those who don't know, it's basically about this professor, Scott Hahn, brilliant theologian, his journey from being a Protestant to converting to Catholicism.
Yeah.
He was like a staunch Protestant too.
He was a Protestant pastor, I think, right?
Yeah,
almost aggressively.
He was a
anti-Catholic.
Presbyterian, I believe.
Yeah.
And the whole book is a mix of arguments in support of Catholicism while also sharing like a personal testimony of how him and his wife like both entered the church. And so I read that in like 2 days, literally.
It's a really easy read.
Wow.
I couldn't put it down.
Yeah. When I say easy read, I don't mean like childish. I mean it just flows so well.
Yeah.
Where you're just like, oh, this is like no effort whatsoever. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like read that and then I gave it back to my friend. I was like, all right, I'm done. He was kind of like, what? You're done? And I like literally handed it back to him. I was like, yeah, I think I'll do it. Kind of. And he kind of looked at me. He's like, "You'll do what?" And I'm like, I think I'll be Catholic."
So after that, was it? Yeah, did you have to go a whole another year with RCIA, or?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I didn't really understand the process. I was kind of like, "All right, well, I want to be Catholic. Like,
I want it now.
Let's go. Can I do it tomorrow?" Kind of thing. And he was like, "Well, no. There's actually like you would go through something called RCIA, which is like the initiation." Process for adults wanting to enter the church, and they're actually, that's wrapping up and happening at Easter, which is in like a few weeks or whatever. By the time I declared my intention, he was kind of like, "Well, it's too late now, but you could get in. You could get in for next year." And I was like, "All right, bet I'll do that. I'll wait." So then, this kind of concludes like the college portion of my testimony. From then, I graduated. And moved out to Maryland by myself, knowing nobody, working a job that ended up not being super duper fun per se. But I shouldn't say that. There were good parts. There were good parts about it, but
that's good.
Also, didn't they tell you that you needed to be like relatively close because you'd be coming into the office sometimes, and then you never really had to come in or something?
Yeah, that was kind of the main thing of like why it maybe wasn't as good as it could have been, because they said it was going to be hybrid, and at that point we were just coming out of COVID. But then pretty much right when I moved here, it was like, oh, the Delta variant, and then they just kept us at home forever again. So
and they were like, wow, we saved a lot of money by keeping everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I pretty much just worked from home at this job for like 2 years, but I moved to Maryland for it, and ended up staying because I met like cool people. And I was like, I might as well. It's not that bad. I might as well stay. Like, even if I'm working from home. And
so, a couple questions.
Yeah.
First of all, how hyped were your boys when they were like, when you were like,
they were hyped,
dude.
Yeah. I shared it with. First I just shared it with a few friends, and then we were having like a party at our house or whatever, and with other like Catholic people, and my friends spilled the beans and shared it with everybody. And I remember the distinct moment we were on my patio. And they were just like, yeah! They like literally like mobbed me.
That's awesome.
And,
I love that.
That was great. It was great,
bet.
honestly.
Yeah.
So I'm still in touch with some of those people. So
that's good. That's good. Yeah.
But so anyway, I moved to Maryland and then got involved in RCIA, and it's funny, especially that I really wanted to like know everything before deciding to be Catholic, because part of the purpose of RCIA is to like teach you.
I bet you were like, wait, why didn't I just sign up for this?
Yeah, I got there and they're kind of starting with like, all right, well, who is Jesus? Very basic. And I'm just like, bro, like I already know. I was kind of like, I already know all this.
Yeah,
like I was a little prideful in some sense. I was like, I don't need this.
Yeah.
But then when they got into other stuff like sacraments, I had a really poor knowledge of like sacraments, for example. And the class helped to fill in the gaps of that. But I pretty much I knew quite a bit before going into RCIA, and like I never had any doubts going through it that I ever like wanted to leave. It's like I know like it's technically there's a period of like inquiry where you like decide if you want to like continue on or not. I was always just like I want to stay. I had no doubts like whatsoever.
Nice.
So
you did RCIA here.
I did, yeah. I did RCIA in Maryland.
Awesome.
And yeah, entered the church 2 years ago, and yeah, that's kind of how I became Catholic. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, this has been of mountains and no,
Just kidding. We're not quite there yet.
Yeah. I
Well,
can share a
because
little more.
I think, I mean, I think that's awesome. Like praise God for the way that He's worked. But yeah, and then I guess maybe like I think it'd be good too to follow up with like where you're at now, like how the Lord, like what has it been like the last 2 years, kind of becoming Catholic, like being Catholic, and then getting to the place you're at now. I mean, you're a Catholic missionary now.
Yeah,
So that's kind of wild to think about the journey that's come from that.
Yeah. There was definitely a deepening of my faith when I moved here, because I started going to Mass every Sunday. I found more Catholic friends in the area that helped me to understand the faith even more deeply because they were deeper along in their faith journey than I was. Got involved with like men's community, Peter and Reese are familiar with it. Got involved with that, met some like older guys who just thought it was really awesome that I was just this young dude that was like coming to Mass. And
like super old people like Rob.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, again, I feel like we've shouted him out multiple times, but I feel like Rob deserves another shout out here because there's a man and everything. So
yeah, no, I remember when I met Rob. It was great. Great day. But so yeah, I would say my faith life like deepened. Again, in my free time, I'm also still like I was still searching for even more answers, still very curious or inquisitive about the faith and always wanting to learn more, read more. I read like so many books because I was like, hey, I got all this time, like I might as well just like read more about the faith. So yeah, I just kind of did that, and I was still working this job that again was like primarily like remote, and slowly kind of started to realize that I wanted to do something a little different. The best way I can describe it is like I had spent the last like 2 years or so trying to like form myself deeply and intellectually in the faith, and start to like develop some virtuous habits and things like that. But I wasn't really living out like the Great Commission that Jesus gives to his apostles. If you read the Gospel of Matthew chapter 28, he says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." And I felt like I wasn't really doing that. Like I was forming myself personally in my faith. I was living out my faith to the best of my ability personally. And I certainly had a desire to share it with others, but just didn't really know like how to like do that. And also sometimes felt like the job I was working almost like hindered me from doing that, because it can be hard to like talk about faith at work. I'm sure you guys
over Zoom
have experienced these things. Yeah, or
well, and especially in a very secular. Chase and I have both worked in very like just like kind of business world places where like there's a lot of rules and like you have to be careful what you say at times.
Yeah. Like I had a coworker say to me once that they like kind of like wanted to talk about faith with someone, but they were like, oh, but there's this rule that you're not supposed to talk about religion in the workplace. So like I didn't say anything, but she like she told me something privately about how like she thought God worked in her life in this way, and it was just kind of like, well, I can tell you that because like you've made known to me that you're like Christian, but I wouldn't share it with like someone else because I wouldn't want to violate any like company policies. And I was kind of like, whoa, like that's really wrong. Like, the fact that like workplaces are like this. And so I had a zeal to like share my faith, I think.
That's beautiful.
And that happens a lot with converts too. It's like you just kind of you get into it and you're just like, I want to share it with everybody.
Yeah.
I've experienced, I experienced that myself. I've seen it with so many other converts as well. There's just something different about them, I think.
Oh yeah. They're a different breed. For sure.
Yeah.
That's true.
So I kind of felt like I was just kind of like sitting on the couch and not like doing any actual work for the kingdom of God. This is the best way that I can like put it. But I didn't really know how to do it. I didn't know what way the Lord was calling me to do that. But that started to change. So yeah, 2023. When was this? Yeah. March of 2023. I'd been praying for like months up until that point. I was like, Lord, if you have a different path for me and want me to like switch jobs or switch what I'm doing now, like please like make that known to me. And yeah, the Lord like provided. Actually, Peter and I went to this men's conference together, and one of the keynote speakers was Curtis Martin, who is the founder of Focus, Fellowship of Catholic University Students. And I knew like a little bit about Focus at that point, because I knew Peter was a former missionary, and we had maybe talked about it once. I had heard about it at a prior time as well, and actually looked into it while I was still working at my old job, but then saw all the requirements of, well, you have to fundraise your salary, and also you get placed on a campus that you have no say over, and then it's for 2 years. I was immediately like, nope, like, that, sounded intriguing, but nope, not for me. But then roughly a year or so passed, and I heard Curtis Martin talk, and he gave a very basic talk about what he calls, or what Focus refers to as like spiritual multiplication, which is basically like the method of how we can evangelize the whole world, like practically speaking, because it seems like this daunting task. Like you almost feel like Jesus is telling you personally to make everybody Catholic in the whole world. And it's like, okay, nobody can do that's not possible. Like, in fact, like Jesus was perfect and people still rejected him.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, how is this done? Well, in the way he like articulated it was actually like visually. He had people like stand up in the room. There was like one person stand up, and it was like, all right, now like tap that guy on the shoulder. All right, now 2 people are standing up. All right, now each of you like tap another person, whatever. And then those people stood up, and it was like, all right, now you tap like 2 more people. And then before we knew it, like the whole room was like standing up. And his point was basically that you don't personally have to reach every person, but what you can do is you can reach like a few people, and you can like deeply invest in them, and then you can teach them to lead and invest in other people that you don't have the capacity to reach. And that's how like disciples are made. And I was very impacted by that because it just seemed very practical. It seemed like something that I could do. And frankly, he just, he seemed like he had his head on straight, I guess. And I was impressed at how well he articulated it, and really seemed like an authentic, genuine Catholic himself as well. So yeah, I remember coming back we were like driving back from that, and you said like what's one thing you like took away from that conference? I think it was something you asked me, and I said like, yeah, I feel like I don't know exactly, but I think the Lord's calling me to like switch jobs, but I need to like think about that more. And then like a couple days later, I was chauffeuring him somewhere, as I always was. And I just kind of blurted out like, what if I became a Focus missionary? He just kind of looks at me. He's just like, yeah, you could. You should totally do it. I was like, oh, okay. Well, how do I like do that? Isn't it like too late or something? Because it was like late March.
Yeah.
He was like, well, no, like, even if he was kind of like, dude, even if the deadline's passed, like they would accept you. And at the very least,
I remember telling you that they almost always need male missionaries.
Yeah, it was like they need male missionaries, and like someone of like your like faith and zeal, like they would like take you if you just applied. So I was like, okay, I'll think about it. Thought about it a bit, prayed about it, decided to apply, and yeah, had an interview roughly like a month later, and yeah, they offered me a position, and at that point, I was pretty much ready and willing to like accept that. So I said yes, and then talked to my boss the very next day, gave him my 2 weeks, and then
Put that focus.
2 weeks later, I was off on a plane to Lincoln, Nebraska for Focus new staff training. Literally, like 2 weeks later.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
so-
you gave up a pretty good job from a
yeah,
worldly and financial standpoint and stuff
Sure.
to do what?
Yeah.
To go.
Like
What did you get from that?
Yeah. Well,
I guess
yeah.
what I'm asking is like the sacrifice, like to make
yeah.
sure people understand like what the sacrifice was that you made for that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, the sacrifice was I was giving up like a better salary. In fact, I had like just gotten promoted. Actually, it was kind of awkward because they had announced it, and then like a week later, I was just like, actually, now he's leaving, and I felt horrible. But I was like, so I was giving that up. I'm somewhat giving up like professional career development, kind of like maybe it doesn't look great on your resume to work 2 years at a job and then go take a break and be a missionary for a few years.
I think it does actually.
I think
it actually looks really good now.
yeah, I was gonna say, I think
Okay.
depending on where you go, a lot of really good workplaces will be like, well, you did something you were passionate about.
Or you did
Like,
something
that's good.
different.
Like,
Like this is weird.
Yeah.
Like in a good way. Like,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's actually helpful to know.
Yeah, you're right.
Because I genuinely don't know how. I haven't tried to get back into the corporate world since then. So
well, you're still
I
a
don't know.
missionary.
I
So
am.
yeah,
So
that
what's-
makes sense.
obviously, yeah. I'm
So what's
still a
like
missionary, but-
you got one more year at
Yes.
Towson.
Yep.
And you got Father Mike Mazzulia there too.
Mhm.
I said the last name, Father Mike Mazzulia. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah, Masulia,
Mazzulia, okay,
whatever.
alright,
Yeah.
cool. Which is super cool. So what's any idea what's next after that?
After that, not quite sure. I mean, I could always. Really, the three options in my head right now are: I remain a missionary for at least another year and kind of just go year by year, decide every year if I want to keep going or not. I could work for the church or some other Catholic organization that is not focused but something different, or I could go. I could go back to like a secular job as well. I'm not entirely closed off to that idea. Me like becoming a missionary was not a renunciation forever of all like secular work and saying like, oh, but if you don't do some work for the church, you're like bad and
Right.
you should like, no, I think there are people who need to like labor in that sort of work, and there's fruit for the kingdom that can be born there too. But I just felt like God was calling me in this particular moment to, just live for the Lord in a more like radical way. And I certainly don't regret it. I have a lot of memories from my first year serving as a missionary, and the sorts of things you see. It's just like it's such a blessing. I'm reminded like every day like why I like decided to do it. So
Yeah, and I think it's a pretty cool like extra like grace or blessing that typically focused missionaries often end up getting sent somewhere not necessarily really far away, but not in the same state typically as where they applied
Yeah.
from.
Yeah,
And in your
40 minutes down
experience,
the
like
road.
uniquely, like you're literally in Towson, Maryland, which is 40 minutes from where you were living before, up in the Bel Air area. Like it's just
Yeah.
wild that like you were able to, and so you've been able to maintain like friendships with like Reese and I and the guys up in Hartford County and things like that are like, I think that's been like it seems like that's been a blessing for us at least. And I
Oh,
think
totally,
it probably
yeah.
has been a good thing for
It's
you.
been a blessing for me too. So actually, at training, they like the way they give you your placement is it's like a big surprise. Basically, they have like a placement day where like someone will like give you an envelope. It's like very secret, and they're like, you can take some time to pray with this, but like go and open this, and so I take this envelope, and so I was actually very convinced for a number of reasons that I was going to University of Virginia. That's where I thought I was going. And so like even my envelope was like orange. The colors are orange, and I was like, okay, this is exactly what I expected. Then I open it. It says you're on Team Towson, and Towson was not even on my radar because I thought like they normally don't place people that close to where they like applied from. They almost always like they may move you to like the next state over.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
especially if you applied from the east, like they generally
you're
keep
typically in the
homegrown
area,
East
yeah.
missionaries. But like, so it was not on my radar. And I was like, oh wow! And I read it. I was like, this is actually going to be great because it's not very far, and I get to like stay in Maryland. I get to stay near some of the friends that I've made, and also like be a missionary on this campus. It was a blessing. It was great. And like any fears or like doubts I had about it were like really, really kind of just went away in that moment. I was like, oh, it was a great placement. I love it.
So is there a chance after this next year that if you were to continue, they would move you? I'm not 100% familiar with the process.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a chance. But generally after, once you become like a veteran missionary, which is like your third year and up, you generally have more say about like where you want to be placed. Especially like there are people who are like married missionaries, for example. Or people who are like engaged, discerning marriage with someone. And they may be like, okay, well, I want to be close. I want to be close to this person I'm discerning marriage with. And so could you move me to like this state instead? So you can start to make requests, but like your first year, you got no say where you where you go at all.
You're going where you're going.
Yeah.
Right? Nice.
Yeah. So, and I think like, I mean, at least in the current moment, like I would want to stay. I would want to stay at Towson. So,
that's awesome.
But yeah, you never know. Please, please pray for me because I don't totally know the direction the Lord wants to take my life in, even still.
Right.
I'm kind of just relying on trust in Him.
So wait, how old are you again?
I'm 25.
25, okay. Young blood.
Yeah, I mean, there's a beauty in that though too. Of like, if I, you can call it old experience or whatever, but if there's one thing I've definitely learned over the last few years, like, it's realizing that like we don't get to know the future, and that's actually like really freeing in a sense because it allows us to just like lean into the Lord and just pray and trust in Him and take things a day at a time and not like freak out about like 6 months or a year. Like I think it's beautiful. I think we've talked about this a couple of times, Chase and I, of like, you're going into this second year now as a missionary, like you made a 2-year commitment and you really kind of have no idea right now what you'll do at the end of that. And that's fine though, because like you don't need to figure that out for at least another 6 months or so. Like, you don't have to make that decision till spring of this coming year. So like it gives you some freedom to just kind of live and be a missionary and pray and like see if the Lord makes that clear to you. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be trying to discern that this year. But yeah, in the meantime, just trying to be as attentive to, the needs of the students on campus as I can. We got a lot of good stuff coming this year. The campus ministry there has really, I would say, like transformed in the past year. There's just a lot more. There's a lot more life in it. A lot more like zealous students, and I'm excited for those who are returning to grow deeper in their faith, and to help them like hopefully lead others in faith as well. And of course, excited for all the new people God is going to have in store for us. Because there's so many times where random people will just come to like the Newman Center and we are able to meet them, and it's kind of just like, how did you like get here? Like, we didn't go out and find you and drag you here. Like, how did you get here? And it's like, oh, I just I don't know, I was just walking by and I just thought, oh, I've never been up here before, I'm gonna walk up here. Like that literally
it's
happened.
kind of like that in college though.
Yeah.
It's like I just walked into this
that
house.
literally happened one time. This guy just
Wow.
walked. I was like, what are you doing up here? He's like, I don't know, I just never like went up this road or whatever. We had like one student who's actually like hopefully entering RCIA this year, who
sweet.
like we encountered him because he just parked at the Newman Center. His friends told him he could like park there, and we were like, oh, what's up? Never seen you before. And then he joined Bible study, started coming to like our like social events, coming to mass, and now he's gonna be Catholic because
That's so cool.
he just like
Praise God.
parked there.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
It's like that's not my control. It's not anything I'm doing. That's just like
Well, you're being present. You're being there.
we're being
Yeah,
present,
yeah.
but God is supplying like the people. Like I
Yeah.
think I think people have this perception that we really go out and we find like everybody and we try and talk to like everybody and we try and get the people on the fringes and we do, we do outreach, we do a lot of that, and there's definitely people who come around to the Catholic faith like through our efforts. Yeah, I guess really God working in us, but like us being the instruments of like bringing these people. But other times it's just we literally didn't do anything, but we just prayed for God to like give us an encounter, and then boom, it happened.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. It's the best way to approach it.
Yeah, you just gotta have that radical trust, and that's something you can pray for too, even if you don't have the job title missionary. Like we're actually kind of all called to be missionaries in some sense. Like I'm doing it in this particular way, but even if you're working like a secular job, like you should still pray for like fruitful conversations with people. You should still pray for like a greater capacity to love everybody where they're at, and you should still pray for the people you're working with. You should still try and if there's anybody interested in faith, maybe you could like start a Bible study with them or something, or just try and reach them in some way. So it's not like focus missionary or you're nothing. Like
Yeah.
You're
the
either
missionaries
preaching on the
do all the work
streets or-
and I do
yeah.
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually a very toxic way to look at it. It's a very anti-God way to look at it.
Yeah. So
That's a great
I
point.
know for a fact, like if I did go back into a more secular corporate job, I think I would feel a little more at peace with it now, knowing that's like, oh, okay, actually, like there is a way to like evangelize in this space. Like it's possible, and there are people that are like called to do that too. So
Yeah.
and I think Focus has provides me and all missionaries that work for them like a tool, set of tools to do that. So
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sweet, man. Well, Peter, do you have any
Yeah.
other
I mean,
questions,
any
or-
final thoughts or anything that you want to share before we kind of wrap this up?
no, not really.
You did a pretty good job wrapping it up, though. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I
I
don't
just
want you to
meant-
think you didn't wrap it
No,
up.
no, no.
but-
I didn't mean it that way. I meant before we like conclude the podcast.
Yeah,
But Reese is
yeah.
right. You did
Yeah.
a very good job of wrapping it up.
If anyone wants to join my sport team, I'll send you the link. No, I'm just kidding.
If you want to. I was
mean,
actually thinking about that. Yeah, if you want to
Yeah.
send it to Peter,
I'd be happy
or
to send
me,
it. Yeah,
just
It's
send it.
not-
I'll put the link in the description.
it's not essential. I'm not doing this for money at all.
No,
whatsoever, so
no.
Yeah, which
but,
I think probably what I would say is if somebody wants to do that, I would say the better way to do it based on what Focus typically does would be for them to email us at Of Mountains and Men, and we could connect you with Chase, and then you could
yeah,
have a conversation with Chase,
Meet
because
with
that's
me
kind of the way that
personally,
Focus tries to do it. Is
Yeah,
you want to have
yeah.
like a personal encounter with the person, not just like throw their
right.
link out there. So
Exactly.
Yeah, they prefer to have a conversation.
I would want to meet whoever's supporting me in person. I know everybody who is like supporting me.
Yeah.
That's
I've met
beautiful.
them and talked to them. So
Cool, excellent. Yeah. So yeah, our email will be in the description. We'd be
Yep.
happy to connect you with Chase.
cool.
And as always, if you want to email us, just feel free to. We'd be happy to get questions or comments or anything, suggestions of topics that you want to hear. So
Yeah, or any episode ideas. Yeah.
yeah,
sure,
exactly.
yeah.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, sounds good. Thank you for having me on.
Of course,
This was
man.
Yeah,
blessing.
we're always happy to do it. So yeah, we'll see you all next time. This has been Of Mountains and Men,
I'm Reese.
and I'm Peter.
I'm Chase.
God bless.